Hey, John. Hey, Adam.
Okay.
Greetings, everyone.
Jerry.
Morning, good evening. Good afternoon, everyone.
Christopher's here. I thought you were out today, Christopher.
I am. Wife is recovering, so she's sleeping right now. So she texts me. I gotta run downstairs.
Gotcha.
She had foot surgery, so basically, there's like I can't have anything like official going on, but you know, I can sneak into things.
She's doing okay then.
Yeah, she's doing fine. She's classic, you know, post surgery. It's a foot surgery, so it's like the classic. You know, she's off of the anesthetic and you know the blockers in right now, so she's like, it doesn't feel that bad.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So this is the time. Today is 2021, March 17th. This is the weekly meeting of the Database Scalability Working Group. Let's get started. Start from what has been done in the past week. So Craig, you have the first item.
Yeah, this was an action item from the last meeting we had where we just threw an issue out there for wild ideas for the CI builds table. So I created it and Gregors has already commented on it and it's there for people to brainstorm once we get past the primary key wall.
So it's been quiet in that issue. Please take a look at your comments there to get it going. Everybody on this working group, I mean. Thank you, Craig. Next three items were from me and Eric. Actually, the second item is your MR for the exit criteria. So thank you for proposing that, and thanks to Jerry to merge that exit criteria MR. And the next one, yeah.
Can we talk about the exit criteria?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yes, it updated, but like this is important stuff. So yeah, I just added it as D, but let me remove that because you were kind enough to pre-populate the doc. So I was just pulling up the page. Let me share my screen. So what we merged was, I think these sentences held with minor modification, but I want to add like specific, like almost checklist items to keep us on track. So one is keep in mind the goal would be to accommodate 10 million daily active users on GitLab.com. I think that the intent of this, to be transparent, is I don't want to have the repeat experiences of like we feel we need to do something, whether it's sharding or one of the other split patterns Jerry outlines here. We end up doing something iterative and solving short-term problems, and we take our eye off this long-term goal. So I just want to be clear of like we put this out there because it's very difficult to satisfy this, maybe impossible, without doing something big. And it doesn't mean we can't iterate. Like there's an MVC in there, there's an iterative path to getting there, but this should feel a little bit more like the GCP migration project than the last database working group. This will be a big deal. And then this one is basically about robustness. So the idea would be like, you know, the failure of one database wouldn't automatically take out all of GitLab.com. So limit the blast radius with this architecture is important. And then also we have here minimize or eliminate the complexity for a self-managed use case. We talked about this last time, but it's basically like, you know, we have a unique situation where we're not SaaS only. We ship the same code to other people. They run it themselves. We don't want to have we don't want to fork our database connector. And therefore, like we're testing one thing on gut.com and we have no idea what we're shipping to self-managed users at a different scale. There's many ways to solve that problem. So that's why I worded it as reduce or eliminate complexity. We talked about the way Citus data works, where it kind of, it's a shim you put in and it looks like the application is talking to a Postgres database, but it's actually doing a bunch of magic between itself and the databases. That's one way to manage this complexity. There's others we'll talk about, but this is a very unique problem. We are an open core SaaS. Most SaaSes are not, and that introduces this unique need to not screw up the self-managed use cases. So that's what I proposed with some discussion, and Jerry merged that, so that's in the page. And this should guide every decision that we make throughout this working group. Any questions or thoughts on that? And this can certainly mutate, evolve, be added to throughout time as we learn.
Eric, turning back to the agenda doc, there are a couple questions. Just one from Andreas.
Yeah, that was about a second point. That does mean basically if we want to separate failure modes by users, we will have to split by users on some level. And I was wondering if that is a Z-axis split, and if that is part of what we're aiming for in this case.
I don't think it's opinionated in that regard. I mean, regardless of this, your question to me kind of gets at like, what's our shard key? But regardless of which way you shard, the idea is that like one of those shards can go down and it'll automatically wipe out all of its neighbors, which is kind of the mode we're in today, being unsharded. The primary can be overcome, and GitLab.com is suddenly unavailable. So what I'm talking about is a world where we've got, let's say many shards without dictating the solution. One of them goes down, data on the other shards can be accessed. Now, whether that's a specific one user is affected, one user isn't, that assumes we've sharded by user, but we don't necessarily have to do it that way. It may be that all users can still access their issues, but no users can access their MRs. Like that would be, that I'm leaving open, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
Eric,
was gonna add to that.
I apologize, and I'm just seeing this. I saw it a couple days ago, but then it didn't really process in my brain. This first time I'm looking at it. The third item really doesn't feel like exit criteria. It feels more like just like architectural guidance associated with it, unless we did something like where we did something on SaaS and then we said, yeah, we're going to eventually get to self-hosted, and then we fix it up eventually, which I personally would be against, because every time I've seen large organizations do that, they never get to the second part of that problem. And then that causes forking of code bases and other bad things to happen. I'm okay leaving it in there. It's just more of like, am I getting the sentiment right for that last one, which is, like,
yeah, you're right in the sense that like if we get to the point where we want to check this box and then we're asking the question of, did we just screw up self-managed? That should have been like something went wrong and we went way too far. So this is, its exit criteria is an absolute backstop, but it should inform very early decisions that we're making.
Right. So it's not like I can specifically say there's a task that we're going to do that's going to hit that exit criteria as much as it's going to be, we're satisfied at the end of this process that we haven't done it. Got it. Okay, thanks.
George?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about the exit criteria number one. So I don't know how many daily active users we do have right now, but do we need to wait until we have 10 million to actually know that we met the exit criteria and that we are fine with this goal?
It looks like Jerry's answering the number is roughly 1 million today. I think we don't need to wait to close this out until we've kind of proven that at real scale, because that could take years. It could happen very suddenly. I think we need an architecture that we're all confident could do that. And if it needs to be higher, we can make it higher, but it felt sufficiently ambitious. Where the idea is you look at what we're doing here through this lens, and it's like, the idea is like, yeah, this is we can't take our eye off this ball. We have to do something large and really evolve the database architecture in ways that we've been hesitant through positive intent, and by using our iteration value in the past, we haven't done this thing.
Thank you.
Jerry?
Yeah, I was just going to point out that one of the things we're doing right now is building a benchmarking environment. And right now we're doing it to validate Postgres 12 upgrade and some other things. But I mean, I think over time, the general idea of this environment is I'm just going to dial up the load on the database and see in which interesting ways we break it. So we should be able to get some good approximations of how far we can push this. We obviously have all the data for what the database is doing today and has been doing for a while at levels that we understand. So Obviously, there is some extrapolation there, but we should be able to validate that through the benchmarking environment to get higher confidence on what the architecture is going to do.
Christopher, you want to verbalize your comment?
Yeah, I mean, another way to think of course is that we're doing like a calculation to say this is where we see the system potentially breaking, where we might have to do even a more aggressive architectural change. It's not to say that this is like the true engineering like gotcha moment where we're going to say, oh, it broke sooner, so therefore, you know, because like what we want to see is we would anticipate that there are things that are going to break sooner, and we're just going to have to do fixes associated with those. But that would be more like fixing than a radical architectural change or wide scale application change that we had to do.
Thank you. And I have a question. So maybe it's a good idea to keep iterating on the criteria. I was thinking about some kind of data-driven and more breakdowns, more specific goals to achieve under each paradigm. I mean, those three are the paradigms to me. So just a thought here. We probably want to keep iterating on the criteria, but this is a very good framework, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's definitely deliverables under these things, and so if we should track them somewhere. We don't want to necessarily overcomplicate the exit criteria because like they're meant to be the North Star, as opposed to a task list. But yeah, open to ideas. What's worked in past working groups. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Next item is also me. Just a quick update status. Two work streams and the DRIs were merged into the handbook page, and also I added a working group database scalability label and build a board here to show all the outstanding issues at the moment. So thanks for using that. And when you have issues to this working group, please label accordingly. Any questions? Okay, moving on to what's happening next. So Craig, I guess the memory team update is from you.
Yep. So we're going to start working on the composable code base pattern, and sorry, my screen's bouncing around a little bit. The splitting application into functional parts is the first step. Stan's good question. It helps us to break down the monoliths so we can kind of focus in on areas where we may have some high traffic to the database. It's eventually will feed into the data application layer that's in Jerry's blueprint. So immediate benefit, not really. It's building blocks to get us there, if that makes sense.
Okay.
That being said, maybe Blocker should have come first. The memory team is pretty fully invested in the rapid action for verified database queries right now and supporting that, which I did not call out here. I called out some other blockers. Database team is fully focused on the primary key migrations, and I gave an update on the webhook logs. That's the one that's going on right now. It's about 37% complete. That one, the migration is being done in the old style where it's a serial migration. Bullet point 2 about the migration helpers. We've built some helpers that will help us to tune migrations so we can configure the block sizes, the batch sizes on migrations, and we can do them concurrently. So it's not a serial migration process. I'm working with Giannis and Fabian to reorganize our epics that are supporting all these so we can better surface where we are on migrating all of the primary keys that are in jeopardy right now. Events should kick off this week. I'm not sure about scheduling of CI builds yet. And then, so any questions on that?
No need to verbalize my question as long as you are working on that.
Yep. Postgres SQL 12, we just talked about that in the GitLab.com daily stand-up. We will, if we're expediting the upgrade to PG12, database team will have to expedite this work. Explicitly marking CTEs with materialize. It's not a significant amount of work, but it's, it will offset other work when we have to expedite that to get it done prior to the upgrade if we do expedite the upgrade. And we may reach out to other teams to help once we set a standard on here's what you need to do. And there are X number of other queries that need to do the same thing. We'll ask the teams to help out if we need to delegate. And then potential bottlenecks. So we have a couple paternity leaves upcoming. Called out there. I don't know what else we need to call out. So short-term headcount reset. Right, Christopher's question.
Yeah, basically, this is awful because it's just like limited visibility. But like I was talking to somebody on the global search team, and he was talking about disappointment and the fact of we haven't seen as much adoption where other teams are picking it up. So I was like thinking to myself, okay, of the burning issues we have right now, and I talked to Nope a little bit about global search as well, and he's like, well, you know, it's when teams decide it's important to them, and it feels like we got it into a pretty decent state. Where the growth seems to be going pretty good independent of it. And I'm just wondering whether or not like we should be like looking at like teams like that where it makes sense to even pull them in for, you know, 1 or 2 months to potentially help with this kind of stuff.
Sure. I would not turn down more help. I guess the only question would be expertise, right? Is there PostgreSQL expertise on that team that could jump in and help quickly?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Chen, you want to talk about it offline and see whether or not we think it's something we want to propose?
Yeah, I've been talking to Craig offline to see if additional hands will help. So we already started that talk.
Okay.
And right now I'm looking inside into the enablement sub-department, but I will keep that option open that we may look for some people from other groups.
Yeah, if you said, well, we just got to ask generally, I'm okay doing a general ask. I just thought of the one particular, not because of any other reason, just a conversation.
Yeah.
And well, may not be obvious, but DB maintainers would probably be a good place to start as well. See if there's any bandwidth there. Right, and Andreas, you've got bullet point D there on recent incidents.
Yeah, I'm joking a little bit, but in case it wasn't obvious, we did have database incidents that kept us busy. So that is sort of fixing short-term things that do prevent us from working on the larger term topics, right?
Is it I was typing, where are we? Recent incidents.
Yes.
Oh yeah, there were 2 incidents recently, last week and this Monday. Both were on Mondays that the database situation. So I think everybody here should be aware of those incidents, and we are running daily stand-up to mitigate that risk.
No, I think Andreas is just pointing out that their workload increased as a result of the incident, so that may be a blocker to the work that we're doing here.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was typing.
No, and not only that, the document just, at least in my screen, just moves back and down as people are editing. So it's like, wait, where's my, anyway.
Yeah, and we do have a few items updating there, like PK, primary key overflow progress as a midterm or long term. I mean, this whole group is a long term in that daily stand-up. Okay, no more questions about blockers. Then let's move on to discussion items. Andreas, you have the first one.
Yeah, this came from last week. Basically, we talked about it a bit. We are basically talking about introducing a data access layer in the application. And one of the concerns that we discussed is like, do we need to treat all the data stores that we will have as a single entity? And what does that entail? And one of the concerns that I have is basically, are we trying to hide that complexity from a developer? And should we do that? Should we have that as in a data access layer so that as a developer, you don't need to know about where the data stores live, where the data lives? And are we concerned with the complexity that comes out of that? And Jerry did already answer some of those concerns.
That's actually something we should consider adding to the exit criteria. It's kind of akin to like not screwing up the self-managed use case. Like, let's not tank the open source contributor experience. It's already a pretty complex thing to contribute to, so that's something we should definitely consider. Can everyone still contribute when we finish this work? That's really important generally.
I wonder if it actually gets easier if we have this one data access layer, because as easy as it might look, you might easily screw up things when you combine different data stores that you're not supposed to work with, or that maybe are not as well covered. So thinking it's very similar to having an ORM, basically, it allows you to interact with the database without knowing much about it. At the same time, it does hide the complexity from you, but it doesn't prevent you from still running into those problems. So I don't know if we need to hide all of this complexity from a developer.
So I think it's an item that needs further discussion. Obviously, I suggested it in the original write-up because it is how I've seen this problem solved. Because once you start having multiple data stores, then expecting 400 developers to truly understand which store is which, it's going to get tricky. And once you start having these multiple data stores, then caching becomes like this integral part of the application, right? And so take our case where there are all the stage groups are doing things to the database. Again, once it starts, you know, once we start pulling strands, then we should avoid having one team solving this problem one way and another team solving this problem this other way. So again, this is based on prior experience. I am by no means a software architect, but I've been close enough to people writing these types of systems to understand what they're trying to do. I think it's one of the bullet points, and it's something that I think was assigned to Camille to think about and explore. So it's probably worthwhile seeing what his initial thoughts are as a DRI on this aspect. And maybe the determination is, no, we don't need to do this. Okay. So I don't know if we can answer most of those questions right now, but
I think to the extent we have different proposals, the exit criteria can act as different facets of them. Like you could almost score each according to these criteria, making it easy for people to contribute being one of them. And then we choose the option that averages out the best.
okay.
And we could do simple linear attribution, or we could weight these criteria, like how important is not complicating self-managed instances compared to making it easy to contribute after this change. Like maybe we want to weight them.
Right.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to the second discussion item. So I have a question. How do we identify the next two patterns for the first iteration? Jerry, you have some thoughts to share?
Yeah, so my feedback of that is we focus on read mostly and time decay. Read mostly because it seems to be a relatively easy problem, and time decay because it is an active problem with CI builds. I would rather we don't try to like move across, 8 different lanes trying to do too much. Also, solving this is going to give us some data as to do we need a data layer or not. It's like dip toes in water. So I would suggest we focus on those two initially, especially given that the CI build stable is becoming a pressing issue.
So I added a couple comments there. I think some of the read mostly work is in flight with the rapid action, and I called out the issue for the sidekick jobs that the memory group's working on right now. Time decay, we are addressing some of it. Started down that path with webhook logs, primary key migration, and partitioning combination. And then I know some discussions, and it's mostly brainstorming at this point in time with the CI builds is underway. That's going to be a 2-step process because the tables are much more complicated than the webhook logs. So migrate the primary key, then partition, then time decay on the CI builds tables. Andreas, I see you typing while I'm talking. You want to verbalize and I can take notes?
Yeah, thanks. Typing slowly. Would it make sense to get a sort of a summary for the time decay approach that we're discussing for webhook logs? That is basically how do you implement efficient retention strategies based on partitioning? This is a problem that we currently have. Webhook Logs has a retention strategy, but it struggles to keep up. So we have much more data than we actually need to because we failed to delete it basically in time. And that is a pattern that we can apply more universally, basically. So we can have a short summary on that if that's helpful.
Yeah, and on CI build specifically, one aspect that I would like to highlight is that I know there are conversations about cleanup that needs to take place on that table. We should pay off our debt before we start thinking about scaling, right? Because if we scale, if we all agree that that table has a bunch of stuff that shouldn't be there, then scaling that and making it distributed in some way is just distributing that junk around. And then it's going to become a bigger problem to solve later, I think. So I know that I think is the epic that Gregors has identifies that the primary key stuff, some of the schema issues, and I would be in favor of solving schema issues before we start like actually extending this thing in various ways.
As primary key being the most important thing to solve.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Gregor, you want to verbalize your?
Yeah, so we've had like a lot of discussions about CI builds and our strategy for partitioning this table. There are two ideas, like the time decay solution has been mentioned today, and another one is partitioning by project and namespace. And I think this is interesting discussion that is not only relevant in case of CI builds, but might actually be like a problem for other teams later. Time decay is interesting because it's aligned with the working group goals. It's easier to actually separate data to different data stores, introduce different data stores that are like much smaller and less powerful for like old data. But partitioning by project and namespace, it's easier in the sense that it might require much less product changes. And I just wonder if there's some heuristic we can apply here to make a decision about choosing either over like one over another easier.
Thank you. Nick?
Yeah, I just had a point. I know it's not the most, there are more important considerations here, but something to note is that project namespace could have some benefits for self-managed Geo customers and potentially Geo on .com in the future.
Yeah, and I put in, I know something that keeps coming up and won't go away is this issue of data residency. For instance, like GDPR, European customers wanting their data in a German data center, for instance. We decided not to complicate this working group to tackle it at the same time, but we should think about like, if that's next, we shouldn't do anything that makes it that harder if we have the chance to choose one shard key versus another, for instance, or whatever it is. So maybe I'll add I think I'll do another MR for exit criteria, add my suggestion up above, and then just put something really general here of like, don't make data residency any harder than it is today. Not that has to guide every decision we make. I think we're going to ask product in parallel to like work on more requirements for that, because there's data at rest, data at transit, what geos are actually valuable, what does performance mean. So we won't pollute this working group with that, but like we just need to be aware that that is likely coming, and we shouldn't really corner ourselves with a A/B decision we're making here, where we feel like it's 6 of one, half dozen of another. Let's do this. Like this could be a tiebreaker for some decisions that seem on equal footing.
GDPR requirements, I think I agree with you. The one aspect I can see is that the residency of users and the length of time that they've been using the product can be directly proportional to the scale. And it really feels like we need the time decay policies kind of for various pieces of this. Like, what are the expectations that you can see a build from 10 years ago? Or is it, you can only see like for the last 2 years, short of you having to go into like a glacier or some kind of offline kind of environment to basically pull that information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so Jerry and I chatted about this via Slack, so we should, I have to run to another meeting, but we should just find the right level to not let this distract from what we're trying to do here, but also let it inform like anything, or it's like an A/B decision. Let's just take this into account, make sure we don't make things much harder for us imminently.
Okay.
Okay, we are at the time, didn't finish, but Jerry, you want to verbalize quickly?
Yeah, I just want to point out that the things that I wrote in the original mark for the working group are proposals or guidance. If there are other ways to do things, by all means, let's put on a work together and do things differently. So just because I said time decay, please do not assume, oh, time decay it is. If there are other ways of solving problems, by all means, let's just do it differently.
Thank you. My last question is who is going to drive this investigation? We can leave that in the async communication in the Slack channel, but please, if you can, you have, you're interested, please volunteer yourself to be the driver of the investigation. Thank you. We'll move other items to next meeting. Thank you everyone for today. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.